every week. Same store, same numbers, same quiet moment of hope before handing over the cash. You probably know someone like this. Maybe it's a coworker who never misses a Tuesday draw. Maybe it's a family member who's been playing the same 6 numbers for 15 years. Or maybe, if you're being honest, it's you. And here's the thing, you already know the odds. 1 in 292 million. You know that. They know that. Everyone knows that. And yet every single week the ticket gets bought. So the question isn't whether this is rational or irrational. The real question is, what is actually happening inside the mind of someone who does this week after week for years? Because once you understand that, you'll never look at a lottery ticket the same way again. If you're new here, subscribe to Blue Money Mind. I'm Berg, and this channel is about understanding the psychology behind the financial decisions people make, including the ones that don't make obvious sense on paper. 40 million American households play the lottery on a regular basis, not occasionally, regularly. And together, they spend more money on lottery tickets every year than on movies, music, books, and sports tickets combined. Oh, that number is staggering when you sit with it. But here's the part that makes it even more interesting. The majority of those habitual players are in the lowest income bracket. The people who can least afford to spend that money are the ones spending the most of it proportionally. And that paradox, that specific, uncomfortable paradox, is where the real psychology begins. The easy explanation is that these people are being irrational, that they don't understand math, that they're being exploited by a system that preys on desperation. And there's some truth in that. But that explanation is also incomplete, because what the research actually shows is something far more precise and far more human than simple irrationality. Studies on lottery behavior found that when people perceive their income as low relative to others around them, their desire to buy lottery tickets increases immediately. Not because they suddenly believe they'll win, but because the lottery becomes, psychologically, one of the only available tools to correct for the gap they feel. The ticket isn't just a gamble. For many people, it's the one affordable entry point into a possibility that their regular life doesn't offer. That's a completely different frame, and it changes everything about how you interpret that weekly purchase. Now, let's talk about what's happening inside the brain, because this is where things get genuinely fascinating. Your brain is not built to understand odds, like 1 in 292 million. Those numbers are too abstract, too large, too far from anything your mind can actually picture. So, instead of processing the real probability, the brain falls back on mental shortcuts, and those shortcuts are deeply, deeply biased toward hope. One of the most powerful is called the availability bias. When you think about the lottery, what comes to mind? A winner, someone crying, a giant check, a life transformed overnight. That image is vivid, emotional, memorable. What doesn't come to mind are the 300 million people who played that same week and won nothing. Their stories weren't on the news. Their faces weren't on billboards. So your brain genuinely, automatically overestimates how common winning is, not because you're foolish, but because that's how memory and attention work. Then there's the gambler's fallacy. The quiet, stubborn belief that if certain numbers haven't come up in a while, they're somehow overdue. That the universe keeps a kind of debt it will eventually pay back. Logically, every draw is completely independent. The numbers have no memory, but the human brain is a pattern-seeking machine, and it finds patterns even where none exist. So the player who's been watching number 17 almost appear for 6 months feels, in a very real way, that 17 is getting closer. It isn't, but the feeling is real. And then there's something even more interesting, something called the illusion of control. Research by psychologist Ellen Langer showed that people who get to choose their own lottery numbers behave as if they have better odds than people who receive a random quick pick. They hold on to their tickets longer. They're less willing to exchange them for a ticket with objectively higher chances of winning. Think about that. I found choosing your own numbers, which mathematically changes nothing, psychologically changes everything. It transforms a passive purchase into a personal decision. It makes the outcome feel partially yours. And that feeling of ownership, of involvement, is powerful enough to override basic logic. But here's where the story goes, somewhere most people don't expect. There's a specific neurological phenomenon that keeps weekly players coming back even after loss after loss. It's called the near-miss effect, and it's one of the most well-documented mechanisms in gambling psychology. When you match 4 out of 6 numbers, or when you're 1 digit away from a prize, your brain doesn't process that as a loss. It processes it as almost winning. And here's the troubling part. Brain imaging studies have shown that near-miss outcomes activate the same reward regions as actual wins. The ventral striatum, a core part of the brain's dopamine system, fires in response to almost winning in patterns that closely resemble the response to winning itself. So the brain is essentially rewarding you for losing as long as you lost closely enough, and the more frequently someone plays, the stronger this effect becomes. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a neurological response that was never designed for lottery tickets. Now here's where the nuance matters, because not every weekly lottery player is the same person. There's a real difference between someone who spends $5 on a ticket as a ritual, a small entertainment, a brief mental vacation, and someone who genuinely believes, at some level, that the lottery is their most realistic path to financial change. The first person is mostly fine. The second person is in a much more complicated psychological space. And the line between those two is often invisible, even to the person standing in it. What makes it harder is that the behavior looks identical from the outside. Same store, same numbers, same weekly trip. But the internal experience, the weight of that hope, what it represents, what it's compensating for, can be completely different. Research on this found that the strongest predictors of habitual lottery play aren't optimism or greed. They're perceived social deprivation and peer behavior. In other words, people play more when they feel behind, and when the people around them play too. It spreads through communities, not because people are being irrational together, but because the feeling of being left behind is being felt together. There's one more layer here that tends to get overlooked. A study from Columbia University and UCLA found that people who believe luck is a stable personal trait, something they carry, something consistent about them, show more perseverance toward their goals in general. They feel more in control, more capable. Which means that for the weekly player who has built a real identity around their numbers, their ritual, their belief that their time is coming, that belief is actually doing psychological work. It's not just denial. It's a coping architecture, a way of maintaining agency in a life where agency feels scarce. That doesn't make it financially wise, but it makes it deeply, deeply human. And that's the thing that the simple, they're just bad at math explanation misses entirely. The weekly lottery player often isn't confused about how unlikely winning is. They know. What they're doing is making a bet on hope itself, paying a small, manageable amount to keep a door open in their mind that everything else in their life seems to be closing. The lottery isn't selling jackpots. It's selling the experience of possibility. And for tens of millions of people, that experience is worth a few dollars a week. The real question, the one worth sitting with, isn't whether playing the lottery is smart. It's what it says about a system where, for so many people, a 1 in 200 million chance feels like the most accessible opportunity they have. If this video made you see something familiar in a completely different way, that's exactly what this channel is here for. Subscribe to Blue Money Mind if you want to keep understanding the psychology behind the money decisions people make, including the ones nobody talks about honestly. And if you've ever played the lottery, or you know someone who does, drop a comment. I want to know what you think is really going on.